Back in the day when I was 12, 13 years old, I remember looking at these magazines, these muscle and fitness magazines, Flex magazine, and just being enamored with these bodybuilders. And I wanted to have a body like that. Of course, I never reached that goal, but I worked out. That's when I started working out, ages 12, 13, lifting weights and doing it all the wrong way, doing curls every single day and all kinds of nonsense that now we know is not a great idea. One of those people that I used to see on these covers of magazines is Lee Labrada. Lee Labrada is a retired bodybuilder. He's one of the world's best known and celebrated bodybuilders. He holds 22 professional bodybuilding titles, including the IFBB Mr. Universe. He's one of the few pro bodybuilders in history to consistently place in the top 4 at the Mr. Olympia competition, which is the Super Bowl for bodybuilding, 7 consecutive times. I used to be enamored with Lee Labrada and his poses and his physique and his lean physique. In this conversation with Lee Labrada, we talk about the history of bodybuilding, how it has evolved throughout the years. Talk a little bit about his son, who is a professional bodybuilder. How is it healthy and how is it unhealthy to be a professional bodybuilder these days? We also expand on aging successfully. What does that mean? I mean, if you look at Lee Labrada's physique today at the age of 64, you'd be impressed. And he has a regimen. He's very disciplined. And we discuss his protocols, his lifestyle. So please enjoy this amazing conversation with the one and only Lee Labrada. Let's go. Welcome to the Dr. Geo podcast. I am your host, Dr. Geo, where it is my intent to help you optimize and bring results to your prostate health, testosterone health, and erectile health. Also, how do we live better with age? How do we do better as we get older, stronger, fitter, more healthy? Today's conversation is along those lines with my special guest, Lee Labrada, who you know everything about from the intro. Lee, thank you so much.
Gio, it's my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here with you guys today.
You know, when you said yes to the invitation, I felt like a kid again because, you know, as a 13-year-old, so we have a similar story in few. We come from Cuban descent, right?
We do.
As a young teenager growing up, you sort of go through this period of who am I? And, I'm American for sure, but man, I have these Cuban roots. And then so you start admiring anybody else's Cuban. And I didn't know initially, I didn't go by your name, even your mustache back then. But here I am collecting these Flex magazine and Muscle and Fitness. This guy, Lee Labrada, wow, what a great shape. And I just kept getting those, like, wow, Lee. And I find out you're a Cuban. Before then, I admired Sergio Oliva. He's a little bit before your time, another Cuban bodybuilder with great poses. Participated in bodybuilding and never competed in that sense. But, as a young teenager, who doesn't want biceps and things like that? So, I sort of looked up to Lee Labrada back then.
Thank you, Gio.
I think you were born in Havana.
I
and
was.
then you take us back before your bodybuilding days as to how did you end up in the U.S. and it just lived, if I remember correctly, and then Houston. So take us back. Go ahead.
Right. So I was born in Havana, Cuba in 1960. And then in 1962, emigrated to the United States with my grandmother. We were joined by my parents 6 months later. And separation was because of some government holdups and paperwork and that type of a thing. The communist government being what it was, and with the entire middle class on the island fleeing, they made it as hard as possible for us to emigrate. But here we are in the United States. The United States received us with open arms. And I'll tell anybody to this day, being an immigrant myself, I owe so much of our success to the United States. I'm very much an American and very grateful. And so we settled in Chicago, Illinois. And my father went to work as a civil engineer, which was his training. And
why Chicago, Lee? Do you know?
Yes, because we had an aunt that lived in Chicago. Yeah. And so, when you hear of Cuban immigrants coming over, it's typically South Florida. There's a big Cuban American population in the Miami area. And so we skipped Miami and went to Chicago. And boy, that was a real eye opener because of the change in the weather. For any of you that are familiar with Chicago weather and those brutal winters, for somebody coming out of the islands, it's a bit of a climate change.
Yeah.
So we settled down and we proceeded to make a living for ourselves. My father taught me very early on that if you work hard and you work intelligently, anything's possible in America. We eventually ended up moving to Jacksonville, Florida when I was about 10 years old, and that's where I went to school. When I hit high school is when I actually became interested in developing my physique. I was playing football at the time, and I ended up with a back injury, soft tissue back injury. So I ended up in the gym, and I found that I was a better bodybuilder than a football player. At 5'6", I wasn't going to be a pro football player anyway.
Right.
Started developing, my body started developing, and I entered my first bodybuilding competition when I was 17 years old, and I won the Teenage Mr. Jacksonville, Florida. And I quickly found out that bodybuilding was much more than just biggest guy wins. It's also about muscle insertion, symmetry, proportion, definition, conditioning. There's so much that goes into that sport. But that's what started me on the road of bodybuilding.
I didn't know that. And then eventually when did you end up in Houston and why?
Out of high school, I went to school at Northwestern University right outside of Evanston. I attended there for 2 years, and my father moved the family from Jacksonville, Florida, to Houston for work, and I decided to go ahead and join them. Much warmer place. I moved to Houston to complete my studies at the university here. That's how we ended up in Houston. Incidentally, my background is in civil engineering. And so, when I graduated from University of Houston, I went to work as a civil engineer designing high voltage transmission line towers. And I
Mm.
still remember to this day working out in the afternoons. After working as an engineer, I would go work out in the gym, and it was a very Spartan lifestyle. But I did that for a couple of years, and I ended up winning the 1985 IFBB Mr. Universe, and that's when I got my professional designation, and I went into the professional ranks. And I still remember sitting down with my dad, who's an engineer also, saying, "Dad, I'm going to quit my engineering job, and I'm going to become a professional bodybuilder."
That there's no way that went well. There is
Well,
no way that went
to,
well.
to his credit, he wasn't angry. He just looked at me, and I still remember to this day. Can't you do both? So
As having kids in college, one in and the other one next year, and one goes to NYU, right? So you're always fearful that they hang out quite a bit with the theater and the film crew, and they come back and say, "Dad, you know what? I changed my mind. I want to go into film." I'll say,
it's a little difficult to make your living as an artist. I was able to actually parlay being a professional bodybuilder into a very good career for myself.
I don't know how he saw how he was able to see far ahead as I could imagine. As a Cuban father, we have certain traditions and things, right? The way we look at life, the way we culturally look at success, we brought that with us. And my parents did very similar to you. We didn't stay in Miami. We came to New York, and not only came to New York, came to the Bronx. So I grew up in the crack era of the Bronx in 1980s, and that's where my dad was able to make a living without ever learning how to speak English, actually. So he found a way to speak Spanish and make a living through that market, Spanish speaking people. And they had one goal in mind: make sure that their kids were fine and that they had an education, and they were with an education you can do anything kind
That's
of
right.
approach.
That's right.
And so here we are. It was tough because when you grow up in the Bronx, first of all, coming out alive it wasn't that easy with shootouts and things, but
Wow.
they had us very well disciplined. And this idea of just going out to the park and play, we were not able to do that because they knew that nothing good happens there. So my mother had the iron fist, and it was tough then, but I certainly appreciate it now. So the Cuban story and how people end up here is fascinating. Thanks for sharing that.
It's part of our heritage.
I love it. Looking back at your career, you won the Mr. Universe.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's a very good question, Gio. The short answer is I don't know, but it was a big deal back then because the IFBB Mr. Universe is also known as the Amateur World Bodybuilding Championships. And
Hmm.
so you had the very, very best of every country competing.
Mm.
There was over 100 countries that sent teams to compete in these events. And so it was a really big deal for me personally, and also for the USA also. We have to win. We have to do good for our country as well.
Yeah.
Event, and it was very, very competitive. Back then, you had to literally win the world championships in order to get your pro card. It's not like today where where getting a professional classification is a lot easier.
Yeah, now, well, we don't have to get into those details, but I'm very super fascinated by it. I just want to get into so much more information, be respectful of your time. So you made it to top four Mr. Olympia. So Mr. Olympia is the Super Bowl for bodybuilding.
Yes, it is. We're the very best of the best compete. Every bodybuilder that competes in the Mr. Olympia is a Mr. Universe or a Mr. World or a major title holder. And so it's to find out who the best of the best is in the entire world for that year. I placed top four for 7 consecutive years. I appeared on over 100 bodybuilding magazine covers. I was competing against guys that I was consistently giving away a 40 or 50 pound advantage to. I was easily the smallest guy in the stage always.
Mm.
So I was punching up, let's say. That was challenging, but I found a way to do it.
What moments are most memorable for you?
I would
It
say
has. So, what do you remember most from your career?
some of the most memorable ones, the 1985 IFBB Mr. Universe, because that is what punched my ticket to go into the professional ranks, and it was a very difficult thing to do. I mean, imagine a sport like basketball or football where if they were to only pick four college athletes that could go to the NFL or the NBA that year, how competitive that would be.
Sure.
So you get an idea of how difficult it is to do. And obviously, bodybuilding is a smaller sport, but it's so extremely competitive. So that was just a landmark win for me. Another one that comes to mind was the 1992 Professional World Cup because it was held in Spain.
Mm.
And, my grandparents are Spanish.
Sure.
The Spanish audience knows of my Spanish roots, and they were just going crazy when I was competing. Whenever they would pull me out to compare me against the other bodybuilders that I was competing against, the whole place would come to its feet and they would be
Wow.
screaming and yelling. So I had the audience in my hands, and that was very gratifying. My mom and dad were there, and my newborn son, Hunter, was there. And I actually got to hold Hunter overhead at the Pro World Cup and show him off to the audience. And what was really interesting was that moment was a bit of foreshadowing because, as you already know, Gio, because you're a bodybuilding fan, my son is actually ranked top 6 in the world right now. He's competing in the Mr. Olympia this year for the 5th time.
I know that. Let me tell you, one of the compliments that I gave you and I give you is raising an amazing son. I got to meet him, and this is how we connected. I got to meet him at the Arnold's Classics a few months ago at Columbus, Ohio. First of all, I took a picture. I'm not a bodybuilder. I weigh 230 pounds at 5'10". I'm not the smallest guy in the world. And I look really small in some of those photos next to Hunter. I'm like, God, this kid,
Yeah,
but he's walking around 300 pounds. Huh?
yeah, he's got like 60, 70 pounds on you. So, yeah, he makes everybody look small. And what's really funny is that the image that I have in my mind of what I look like, even though I'm just 5'6" and 170 pounds. But man, when I get next to my son and we take a photo together, and I take a look at the photo afterwards, and I'm going, my God, does he really look that much bigger than I do? Because I look like a child standing next to him.
So, how has bodybuilding evolved throughout the years? So, again, my perspective,
Yeah.
after Coleman, everybody's just huge.
Yep.
It's not even close. I mean, they're just huge
Yep.
and have symmetry and are cut. Again, the size is just insane.
It's like
And
it's like any other sport, in that as the sport grows, the genetic pool gets bigger. It attracts people that have an inclination towards that sport. So if you look at football today, they're bigger, they're faster than ever. In bodybuilding, they are bigger than ever. I think there was more of a premium on symmetry and proportion 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's, headed in the direction of size is king.
and
Lately,
not symmetry.
yeah,
Symmetry.
right now, bodybuilding sport size is still king. What I'm seeing is an inclination in the judging panels to grade size, but they're starting to lean more in the direction of those with size and good proportions.
Yeah, my eyes are not professional eyes, but it seems like to me like some of these guys have it all. And I've gotten to meet them in person, and you look at these people, it's just like, wow.
Anything is amazing to see. I tell people, like, if you go to a track and field event and you see somebody run a world record time in the 100 meters, it's jaw dropping. If you watch somebody set a new record weightlifting or powerlifting, it's jaw dropping. Same thing in bodybuilding. It's shocking. There's such a genetic anomaly.
And the work that they put in,
It's a lot of
it's unbelievable. I met Hunter twice, and both times he was eating, right? What's the nutrition like in this sport, right? So there's some information online. I looked it up. I'm a research based kind of person. Is like, well, if you want to keep a good amount of muscle, is a gram of protein per pound.
yes, 1 gram of
I
protein per pound of body
I
weight.
cannot. And so then I said, all right, let me try that.
Sure.
Right. Because a big part of what I do in my work is, food as medicine, nutrition as medicine, lifestyle
Right.
as medicine, exercise as medicine, these kind
Right.
of things. But before I tell people to do this, I've done every diet, for example. So, well, I've tried, Atkins diet and even plant-based diet. I've done it all. 200 grams. I couldn't get it in.
Well, it's challenging. We're going to come back to how to get in 200 grams of protein a day. But let me just say this for those of you that are watching this, protein has really emerged as a key ingredient for health, especially as we get older. Because I know that there's a lot of men watching this that are over 40, right?
Yep.
And so one of the biological markers that they measure for aging is the amount of lean body mass that you have. And it gets harder to support that lean body mass as you get older if you are not weight training, number one, and number two, providing enough protein to rebuild and
Right.
support that lean muscle tissue. So, from an anti aging perspective, I cannot recommend more weight training, number one, and number two, increasing the protein in your diet. Now, when I say increase the protein in your diet, the first thing that runs across most people's minds is, oh, well, I'm going to start going out and eating a lot more steaks. Well, no, that's not healthy because there's a lot of saturated fat in that. A little bit is okay, but a lot all the time, no. And so, how do you get down 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight? The way that I look at it is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's 3 meals. At breakfast I'll have some scrambled eggs. Egg whites. 6 to 8 scrambled egg whites will have 40 grams of protein.
Yep.
And then for lunch, a chicken breast would have 40 grams of protein. For dinner, a piece of fish could have 40 grams of protein. So right there, you got 3 times 40, you got 120, right? You still got 80 more grams of protein to go. But how do you get that? Well, at mid morning and at mid afternoon, you have a protein shake, and you get your 40 grams of protein in each one of those. Voila, you got 200 grams of protein.
The challenge with that is as you get older, you don't have the same appetite
Right.
as you did when you were younger. So it's almost like if you want to have more muscle, which translates into being optimally functional as you age, because you need one of the things that leads to aging and some of the symptoms of aging, whether it's a chronic disease or just being functional, is lack of muscle and then
Right.
lack of physical strength.
Right.
Muscle and strength is, in my opinion, everything,
Yes.
particularly as you get older.
Yes.
There seems to be a trade off because some of the research indicates no, you want to do more fasting, more intermittent fasting. So then, if you're doing intermittent fasting, which means, or time restricted eating, which means you're eating within 8 to 12 hours a day, that's a short period of time to get
Sure.
all of this protein in.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure these things out as a
Sure.
clinician,
Yeah.
particularly with patients that are dealing with cancer. And, there's some research that indicates some fasting matters and things like that. So, how do you do the right type of fasting and still get enough protein in to sustain enough muscle?
So let me address the one that you brought up. That as a clinician, if you're doing a diet specifically for somebody that has a degenerative disease, like cancer, for instance, that's a whole different ball of
Yeah.
wax, and that really lies outside the scope of my expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
if you're looking for my suggestions in terms of maintaining optimal lean body mass, I think that the protein intake has to be kept high. Now, how do you do that in the context of intermittent fasting, meaning that you're only allowing yourself to eat for 8 hours a day?
Yeah.
That's difficult. I'm not a big fan of intermittent fasting. It works for some people because it gives them regimentation in their diet.
Yeah.
In other words, it's a way for them to reduce the number of calories that they eat in a day by restricting the time window during which they can eat. So I think that the biggest benefit of it is just restriction of calories. It is probably no more effective than another type of restricted calorie diet in terms of weight maintenance or weight loss. In terms of health, I prefer the fasting to be done in the context of not on a daily basis, but on a window, like once a month, you take a day or two to completely fast for 24 or 48 hours.
Right.
I believe if you're after fasting for the health benefit, that's a better approach than doing the intermittent fasting, which in my book is more of a caloric restriction approach.
Right. That's a very good point. There again, lower calories are associated to longevity. It's just it's what I tell patients. This is what the research shows. It's hard to have it all. This is what you can do, however, and give them an action plan that's reasonable for them. Whether it's prostate cancer or just, they typically, most people come to me because they have a problem, a male problem of some
Sure,
sort, right?
sure.
So what's different? I'm just actually very curious what has changed nutritionally for bodybuilders. So when you back in the day, you ate what? Has that changed? Is 6 meals a day to what they do now? What does Hunter do now relative to what you did back then?
Geo, surprisingly, the human body hasn't changed in 50 years.
Or
Which,
than before,
yeah,
but
and what changes is our approach. Try to take a different approach, but our bodies are still digesting three macronutrients: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And it comes down to the number of grams of protein and the amount of calories if you're trying to reduce body fat while holding it down to muscle. The short answer is nothing has really changed. I mean, it's pretty much the same way that I did 35, 40 years ago. The quantities are a lot different because he has 290 pounds of muscle to feed. But healthy nutrition is still healthy nutrition 4 decades later.
how let's talk a little bit, let's segue into training. So my perspective, so I've been lifting weights since I was looking at your magazines where you were in the cover, right now my goal at my age is to sustain muscle,
Mhm.
and I'm really looking at 10 years from now, how do I want to perform? 20 years from now, how do I want to perform? And to me, is like I want to keep riding this wave of being optimally functional for as long as possible. I know it's possible, not only because the research indicates that, but I see it in my clinic all the time with the 80-year-olds doing amazing, for example. They do almost whatever they want,
Wow.
particularly 79-year-old patient who is a tennis player. And so I'm talking to him and say, hey, how's it going? Good. He says, I said, wow, I could see on his date of birth that he's about to be 80. Hey, Larry, you're going to be 80 in a few weeks. Congratulations. How do you feel?
I love it.
What do you mean? You're going to be 80 in a couple of... Oh, yeah, no, I can't wait to be 80. I mean, I've been looking for this day for a couple of years now. It's like, Larry, what do you... He says, well, I'm a tennis player and I compete at a very high level. And I'll be at a new age bracket when I'm 80. I can't beat this 76-year-old guy at my age bracket now. So when I'm 80, I'm going to be in a brand new, and I think I'm going to be the best in that age group, which is from 80 to 84.
Optimism, man. You got to love it.
I mean, it really is. Like,
Thank you.
so tell me about your philosophy, your mindset, your training. How is it different than it was when you were a bodybuilder to age gracefully and to the goal is to live as long as possible with the best quality of life possible.
Right.
What's your approach and what's your philosophy towards that?
So, I've crossed the 60-year-old threshold. In fact, I just turned 64 last month. Thank you very much. So I have looked at, I've looked at my life as 4 quarters. I'm a big football fan.
Okay.
So 0 to 20, okay, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, right?
Okay.
I want to get past 80. Okay. But I'm planning on my emphasis with my exercise program has gone from one of trying to build as much muscle as possible to one of trying to stay as healthy as possible and as functional as possible and as strong as possible as I age. And so the program that I'm using today differs from the program that I used when I was in my youth, when I was trying to put on large amounts of muscle. So instead of trying to annihilate, I just try to stimulate the muscle tissue, because that muscle is the core of the engine of your metabolism. The more muscle you have, the stronger you're going to be, the better your bone density, the higher your metabolism. It clears glucose out of your bloodstream better. Why is that important? There's a lot of degenerative diseases that rely in part on blood sugar levels and the ability to metabolize and clear blood sugar and so forth.
And
Yeah,
insulin.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The emphasis is on stimulating muscle tissue, keeping as much muscle tissue as possible, taking care of my heart and making sure that my heart health is optimal, making sure that things I do from a dietary perspective will support health and longevity. Psychologically, it has gone to a mode where life extension, health, and strength are key. It's paramount for people to be optimistic. Life is going to happen no matter what. Life is going to throw curveballs at you. If you rely on external circumstances to determine how happy you are, then you're basically being blown about like a sheet in the wind. And, whichever way the wind is blowing, that's how you feel that day. That's not good. So there's going to be external stimuli, but how you respond to your environment is key. And so joy is a choice. And I choose to look at life every day, and I choose to approach it from the standpoint of what do I appreciate in my life? What am I grateful for today? And I'm just grateful that I got out of bed. I'm grateful that I'm walking around on my own 2 feet. Gio, I can see you. There's people that can't hear. I've got a roof over my head. I've got food in my stomach. My family's okay. If you start taking stock of all the things that are going right, and you use that as your source of joy, I think that the mind is a very potent thing, and I think mind plus body equals health.
I love it. As a practitioner who sees mostly men in their practice, there are times where I learn so much from my patients, and I feel like I should pay them for the visit because some of them just have pearls, right? Just as you age, you've been around long enough, you have pearls. Somebody comes in, oh, I'm so stressed. Okay. The number one, there's no other factor that is more painful and more stressful ever, is the passing of one of your kids.
I would agree.
Everybody I've spoken to, some men who lost their kid for whatever reason, illness or accidents, there's nothing worse ever. Your job, your issues with your business, nothing worse. And the question is always, is a relative question. How are your kids? Oh, they're healthy. They're doing great. What are you worrying about? What are you worrying about? You have healthy kids? You're good. What are you worrying about? So I think it's all about relativity. Going back to Cuba, you see people being stressed politically. Oh, Trump, I hate Trump. Others love Trump. Others hate Hillary. Want Hillary. Many of my patients, when they were in 2016, and some of them were, one of the elements and pillars of good health is proper sleep. Some of them were not sleeping because of the political environment. And they're asking me, and of course, I'm not getting into a political conversation with anyone. Nothing good there. But I do say this. I sleep just fine. I'm in the US.
100%.
My parents had to figure out in 1968 how to bring I was born here, but my other three siblings were born there, how to bring a family of five.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And with Trump, with Biden, it doesn't matter who's president.
That's right.
And I would have never had the opportunity of doing what I do now, which is what I love. Go to school and go to medical school and become, do the work that I do now. And never in Cuba, not a chance. Not a
That's right.
chance.
We,
So
yeah,
it's all relative. Palestine, right? Not to get, I don't get political at all, but imagine born in Palestine. It's tough for people who live in Palestine. There's no other way. Many parts around the world, you live there, you're not getting an opportunity. So I think stress, to your point, and looking at things a certain way and certain perspectives, about gratitude.
yeah, absolutely. And so much of it just really comes down to how you choose to respond to external stimuli. People say, I'm stressed. Well, guess what? I'm not trying to be callous, but you're stressing yourself
Yeah,
because something is not out here and coming into you. You are choosing to be stressed in response to something out here. Do you
yeah,
see what I'm saying? So if
yeah.
it's stressing you, remove yourself from that situation or don't think about it. Think about something that causes you to feel joy.
In the
Of course,
gym.
yes,
Yep. And get in the gym.
and get in the gym.
Seriously,
Get
isn't
the
that
positive
isn't
brain
it the
chemicals going.
isn't it the best elixir? I mean, if you and I were to bottle exercise, it would be the best drug
It's
ever.
yes. I heard recently a talk show host say, doctors say that muscle is medicine, and I couldn't agree more. Working out is an investment in yourself. It is something good that you can do for yourself every day, and it yields so many benefits. But it has to be scheduled, just like anything else. If you wait
100%.
till the end of the day, and you're going to feel too tired, or you got to schedule it, just like anything else.
And don't worry about being motivated to go,
I,
particularly early in the morning.
I think that motivation is highly overrated.
Overrated.
Okay. Because let me tell you what, I can sit here and I can fire you up and you'll go to the gym today and you'll work out. But what about tomorrow
Yeah.
when I can't fire you up? You know what I think is more effective than motivation? Discipline. Make an appointment with yourself and be true to yourself and show up for yourself. Even if you don't feel like it, go through the motions. You'd be surprised how when you start going through the motions, it kicks in and then
Yeah.
it turns around and it becomes great. It becomes something that you feel good about and you say, man, I'm glad I did that.
Lee, you mentioned that it is definitely a scientific fact that the stronger you physically are as you age, the longer you live and the better you live. This is not an opinion. This is a scientific fact. All right. How do you measure that for yourself? So I do primarily strength training. But if I post on Instagram, you never know how much weight I'm lifting because I don't talk about that. I
Right.
just want to be my best self. But I do want to challenge myself and I do want to deadlift just a little bit more just to make it interesting.
Sure.
Obviously, so I do go a little bit high in certain things. For example, bench press, I don't go high. I have no interest. If I can, I want to bench. For example, this is the first time I say numbers, but 225 as often as possible. My age is more than enough. Deadlifting a little bit different because it gives me, kettlebells, and I do all these things for strength training. So, how do you measure? Do you still do one rep maxes? How do you measure your strength?
No,
And what are your goals as it relates to
I,
physical strength as you age?
I leave my ego at the door.
Yeah,
And I recognize that I'm not as strong as I was when I was in my 30s,
yeah.
but it doesn't matter to me because to me, the weights and the machines are just a tool. They're a tool for applying resistance to my muscles. So what I do is I choose a weight that will allow me about 8 to 10 repetitions. Where the 8 to 10 range is really, really difficult.
Failure.
I do go to failure after warming up. I typically will go to failure on a few sets. I use a lot of machines nowadays, so I don't need a spotter. I don't do bench presses. I think that they're terrible for your rotator cuffs
Mhm.
and can cause pec tears and whatnot. So I choose exercises, a lot of which I can do on machines, so I can spot myself. I have the safety of the machine. I basically just perform repetitions until the muscle fails. And the muscle groups won't take me more than about 15 to 20 minutes to train. Typically, I'll pick 2 to 3 muscle groups and I'll do 15 to 20 minutes for each muscle group with weight, resting only long enough to catch my breath in between sets.
And s- so you go to failure.
So I like to call them weight training machines. There's a bunch of manufacturers that make them. Some of them are commercial grade. You'll find those in the gyms. And that's what I would recommend. I would recommend that you join a gym and that you use the equipment there. What it comes down to, whether you use a free weight or a weight training machine or any other type of apparatus, it's all about applying resistance to the muscle. And you have to apply enough resistance that you tire the muscle out and cause an adaptation.
So no more one rep maxes for you. Those days are
Oh, no,
over.
no, no, no! I won't even come even close to that. I seldom do I drop down below 6 repetitions.
Got it. Cool. How often do you work out? Or what's your workout routine?
So my workout philosophy is to move my body every day.
Yeah.
So every day I'm going to do something. It's typically weight training, but if it's not weight training, then it's going to be cardio. My favorite are the steps, like on the Stairmaster, or if you live in an apartment building, you can just use the stairwell. That's great too. But the important thing is to just get out and to move. As you get older, I mean, and I'm talking, if you're crossing 80 years old, and hey, listen, you got that tennis player at 80 years old. That's fantastic that he can do that at that age.
Mm,
But if the only thing that you can do is walk, then walk. The
yeah.
important thing is to move your blood around every day.
Yeah. I present the information to people and patients that there's a full spectrum of movement. There's low intensity, intermediate, and high intensity. So, including, for example, I'm talking to you from a standing desk, right? So, even just standing, there's something called NEAT, a non-exercise thermal, where even just me moving my hands right now,
That's
there
right.
that is neat. That applies. That helps with metabolism. Just standing versus sitting down. And then there's intermediate, and then there's high intensity. High intensity is probably when you do your 6 reps, which
Right.
is like that's higher, or a heart rate at a certain point. Be within that spectrum, and perhaps some mobility things, so you can stay nice and loose as you get older, which becomes important as well. So Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "I plan to train 7 days a week, every week. If I don't get to do that, I at least got 6 days in. Worst week is 5. But my
Right.
plan and my goal is to work out 7 days a week. What's your approach to that?
I think I would agree. Move every day. I don't think you need to lift weights every day,
Yeah.
but I think that you need to do some type of exercise, whether it's cardio, walking, jogging, bicycling.
So let's talk a little bit about recovery. So I find in my work and research that recovery is essential, certainly for athletes. Now, athletes are paying way more attention. I remember talking to one of the bodybuilders at the Arnold's. I said, "How do you manage your cardiovascular health?" Because we've been seeing a lot of cardiovascular issues with bodybuilders. He says, "Yeah, I do blood work every 3 months, specific to I have a cardiologist, for example, just make sure that's working properly." As one ages, so in my mind, aging is a sport, right? So the fact that you have a body and the fact that you're getting older, you're an athlete. Period. End of story. I don't care whatever else you do, right? Additionally, every man I know wants to do stuff with their body, whatever that means. You sit down on the floor to play with your grandchildren. You want to be able to do that successfully and then get back up.
Right.
If it means that you want to carry things, if it means that you want to be athletic, literally, you want to play tennis. My goal is to pick up basketball with my 15-year-old grandchild.
That's fantastic.
So I'm training to that, right? I'm training towards that. So that's kind of the way I do it. Recovery is an essential component of doing these things. So, good quality sleep, nutrition, and so forth. Your thoughts on recovery? What do you do? What are your sleep? So you are a CEO of a company. You are a father. You are a husband. You have personal things. You work out. How do you fit sleep in? Typically, I find that most men, do try to do without sleep, and I think that's not a great idea. What's your approach with sleep and
I would
recovery?
agree. I would agree, Gio, that it's not a good idea to cut sleep. And this is kind of something that I see a lot in our society. I mean, we try to cram so much into a day that we say, well, maybe I'll just cut an hour out of my sleep. Instead of sleeping, 7.5 hours, 8 hours, I'll sleep 6 hours. You might be able to get away with that once, twice, that kind of thing. But you don't listen. It's like burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah,
Health wise, you're going to pay for it.
I'll sleep when I die.
I've heard that as well.
So, what's your sleep habit?
I'm very regimented that way. So, I'm in bed by 10:30, 10:30, and I'm up at 6:30. And what's really interesting is even if I stay up past 10 or 10:30, which I'll do sometimes on the weekend, it's like I'm just wide awake at 6:30 or 7. It's like I'm on this rhythm. I'm on this biorhythm. So I think that it's important to get the biorhythm. I think it's important to work at getting good sleep. Notice that I said work at it because I realize that as we get older, sometimes that's not easy, but there are things that you can do to improve sleep, as you already know. Alcohol interrupts sleep, caffeine can interrupt sleep. Blue light, looking at your iPhone for an hour before you try to go to sleep, can interrupt sleep. You have to get into a pattern and you have to do things that are conducive for sleeping.
Absolutely. It has to be a priority. It
Yeah.
has to be something that, if you don't think about the different elements of what you're going to do to live longer and better, it's not going to happen. You have to fit it into your calendar.
You have
Literally,
to fit it
you
in.
have to put it into your calendar,
Yeah.
including my workout time. Have a hard stop of when you're going to stop working every day.
Yes.
We all work 12 hours. I work
Yeah.
12, 13 hours a day, but there's a hard stop.
Okay, let's face it. It just seems like the number of things to do always grows exponentially to fit the amount of time that I have, right? So the truth of the matter is that if you give
That's
yourself a
true.
hard stop, if you schedule it, you will work more efficiently because you know that that hard stop is coming. You'll focus more on those things that are important to accomplish and you'll get more done. And then when that hard stop comes, stop, go to the gym, relax, release the pressure, respect yourself, respect your body, respect your mind, and remember that it's a marathon, not a race. If you want longevity, you have to make the investment and you have to make it.
My late father, Cuban, of course, when there was a point where I was struggling with a lot going on, and just said, "Dad," he's like, "How you doing? ¿Cómo está, hijo?" Right? I said, "I have a lot going on. I'm stressed." He's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Just have a lot on my plate." He said, "So who put all these things on your plate?"
Exactly.
I'll talk to them. If you tell me who did that, I'll go and talk to them. Say, "Hey, can you stop putting so many things on my son's plate?" "Oh, no one did." "Oh, you did." All right. So then make a decision to put less
Yeah,
things on your plate.
exactly. Exactly. We have time for anything, but we don't have time for everything.
Yeah, that's right. Lee, now this is really the last question. I'm listening to you. I look at you. God, this guy's a physique, 60 something, 64 years old. Wow, he looks healthy.
Thank
Wow,
you.
he's also a CEO. He's living the life. Wow, he does everything perfectly. Lee, I got to ask you, what is cheating for you? What's a cheat day?
Well,
How do you manage? Do you also schedule your cheating days or moments, or when I'm on vacation, I'm going to go to sleep a lot later, or when I'm on vacation, I'm not going to work out at all, or I love donuts. Like, what's your cheat
well,
scenario?
I don't do everything perfectly, but I do the very best that I can. And if I mess up, I get right back on the bicycle. I don't sit there and cry over it and slash the tires. It's like, oh, I got a flat tire and I really screwed it up. I might as well slash the other tires. No, I don't sit around feeling sorry for myself. I get right back up and I get back on the program. So, I think that the approach is such that you don't want to feel deprived. I'm not one of these guys that will binge. If I see one of my kids or my wife eating a bowl of ice cream, I might have a half a scoop of ice cream. I'm not going to have a pint of ice cream. But the thing is that if I know that I can have it, then mentally I don't feel deprived. I can have it. I just choose not to. I also know that there's some things that I can do dietetically to keep myself from cheating. One of those is eating protein. If you have a small protein shake and you wait 10, 15 minutes, it really takes the edge off the appetite.
Unless, I don't know, if I make a smoothie with let's say 20 grams of protein, but I also add too much fruit.
And what I'm talking about is actually just taking a cup of water and putting in a scoop of protein and stirring it in. We've got some nice hydrolyzed and synthesized proteins in our line, and I'll just take that. It tastes delicious. It's got maybe 120 calories or something like that. Boom, and I just wait, and 15 minutes later, the craving's gone. So protein is very satiating,
Yeah.
and as we've talked about before, it feeds the right kind of tissue, feeds muscle tissue, not fat tissue. So there's a lot to be said for that kind of thing. I also plan my diet, meaning that I plan ahead. When I do meal prep, I prepare my meals on the weekends.
Almost as if you're still competing.
In fact, I think that one of the things is that if you fail to plan, you're
Plan to
planning
fail.
to fail.
Yeah.
If I wait until I'm hungry, Gio, to go get something, I'll go through a fast food drive-through. Once the hunger takes over, you're going to go looking for something, anything that's not nailed down, you're going to eat it. But if I prepare ahead of time and I have a chicken breast and I have some rice and beans and I've got a nice Tupperware and I'm here at the office, I can throw that in the microwave and 2 minutes later, I've got a hot, fresh meal. I've eaten the right thing, and I no longer crave the bad stuff.
I heard you said something there that for any Cuban, they're like, wait a minute, rice and beans?
Every day, brother.
Rice and beans.
Frijoles negros.
O con gris, like I say. That is awesome. How can people be in touch with you and your line of products?
Listen, guys, follow me on Instagram at Lee Labrada Official. You can find our products on leanbody.com. And I would encourage you to go there, not just for the products, but we also have a lot of free information, free videos, free how-to programs. We've got a great YouTube channel under Labrada. I've got a podcast myself, as you already know, Gio. Mm-hmm. I do the Lee Labrada Show, which is on YouTube, and it's very popular as well. And so you guys can get information there. The lean body protein shakes really help to get that extra protein we were talking about. And then as far as parting words, this is what I want to say. Anybody that's watching is this: you can always improve the condition that you're in. You are never too late to start getting into shape, and you can improve. I would suggest that you start some kind of an exercise program today, even if it's just walking. Start there. And if you can join a gym, have someone show you how to use the weight training equipment, the resistance training to help improve your health. And then make some small changes in your diet. Add some protein, cut out some sugar and some fat and things are not good for you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, many tips, many pearls you got from Lee Labrada, bodybuilding professional from back in the day, and certainly living the life and practicing the lifestyle that we all talk about. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much love. Thank you. Thank you so much. Much love to you all, and I'll see you next time. Dr. Gio here signing off. Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Dr. Gio podcast. You can watch all episodes of this podcast and much more by subscribing to my YouTube channel on youtube.com/Gio Espinoza ND. If you love what you heard today, you can help by leaving a 5-star review of the podcast on Apple and Spotify, as each review helps us reach more men who are serious about improving their urological health and how to function better with age. And for the latest research and actionable takeaways in the world of men's health and integrative urology, sign up for my newsletter at drgio.com. I'll see you next time.